Hello everyone, welcome to the Net Online. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're going to kick things off as we always do with a short video clip that will correspond with our message today. And be sure to like and subscribe so we can give you future alerts for when we post messages, and drop a comment below, and thank you guys so much for joining us.
Okay, let's see if you got some good questions. So I'll just take any of them. If you've written down any questions already, if we could just hand those in real quick. I can kind of go through those first. And then after we kind of work through those, then we can do some from the floor. I reserve the right to not answer every question because sometimes I can't read your writing. I'm going to probably have Val translate your writing for me. Girls, I can usually read their writing. They have kind of a swirly way about them. Wow, a lot of y'all wrote them down. Did you put your names on them? You don't have to, but it can be helpful. I mean, if you write on there, my life is not worth living, then we need to talk, okay? Are y'all taking yours back? Oh, okay. What's happening? Yeah, I'm going to start with the written ones first. Let's see if I can read some of them. Okay, well, all right. This is a good question. How do you know it's just a friendship or just unconsciously playing the long game? That's pretty good. And here's what I'm going to tell you. It is not an exact science. It is a very strange, awkward dance we dance. This thing called romance and crushes and all that. Crushes are so painful because they're just one-sided. And most everybody has crushes or numbers of them, and they're unrequited. They're not always, they often don't move to anything beyond just... So sometimes... somebody can unconsciously play the long game. I've seen it done. I've probably seen about half the cases, in the cases I'm all thinking of, are the young man is interested in the girl, and they realize somehow it's not time or she's not ready, and so they will just be patient, and they'll wait. I mean, there are examples in our church. I just don't know if I can name them. But I've seen young men do it where they will just... And it's not like they're saying, I'm just going to be nice because I'm playing the long game. No, there's a certain amount of personal discipline that they had to display where they were willing to remain friends and not cross certain boundaries and start certain conversations until it was the appropriate season, until there was readiness. And in fact, if they had tried earlier, it probably wouldn't have worked. And in fact, maybe sometimes they did. Now, I'll give you one example. I don't think they'd mind me sharing it. Sarah shared with y'all, 3 weeks ago? Gave a really powerful message. It's kind of part of this series. And so Colby was kind of liking her for a couple of years. And I would talk to her, and I would talk to him, and I would talk to her, and I would talk to him. And I would never let on to the other that they were talking to me about each other. I just kept a straight face the whole time. And what I could see was that she was not ready. She was not close to ready. And Colby was smart enough and discerning enough to be willing to lay it on the table for a long, extended period of time. And then there came a time when she was ready. And I'm telling you, it was a long time. I don't remember they could tell you dates, I'm sure. But I remember one time she came to me and said she was volunteering at the aquarium or something. And she comes to me a little panicked, and she goes, Colby wants to come see me at the aquarium. I'm like, okay. I don't know that I see a problem. But I told her, let him come. You have to give the young man a chance. All right. That's just one question. Okay, the question about masturbation, whoever had that, I'll talk to you privately. No, y'all want me to talk about it in public? Okay, no. Okay, how do you know if you are equally yoked? How do you know when it's your season? Is it just when you're out of college and financially stable? Okay, so that's yes, not necessarily. Like I said, it's not an exact science. So being out of college and stable financially is very, very important. Or at least having a plan where you know that college, you can see where maybe a year out you can graduate, you can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you actually have a degree that is economically valuable. Not everybody gets degrees that are economically valuable. Some of them, they get these degrees in underwater basket weaving. And they graduate from college and they go, gosh, nobody wants to hire me in underwater basket weaving. I don't understand. My parents and me and all of us, we've spent so much money and it's such a hard course to take, but nobody wants to hire me. But there are certain college degrees that you know when you get them, in 90% of the cases, it has economic value the day you graduate. So that would be, y'all could probably name some of those degrees, especially technical degrees. So nursing, medical degrees, engineering, computer science. A lot of these types of degrees, they have intrinsic economic value and high demand placed on them. So I think all of those are considerations. Do you have the ability to provide for a family? And in that case, it mostly falls on the young man. But the women, again, what if you're not going to get married for 6 or 8 years? You still need to provide, and you might as well provide for yourself well. And most girls are getting college degrees today, more so than men, 2-to-1 ratio. So I think that's part of the equation. And like I was talking about Colby and Sarah, there was a readiness. Yeah, they were both getting their degrees, and maybe he was completing his before hers. I don't remember exactly, except that there was some preparation there. But her preparation was not about economics. It was about her emotionally being prepared to look at, there was one point she shared with me that I can't see myself ever getting married. In other words, and part of that was because of her broken family, and she was having to come through that process of building on a new foundation. What does that look like, and is there hope? And so she developed hope. She developed faith, where she could begin to see moving forward. So yeah, that's part of knowing your season, but there's also all the other components, the emotional components and things like that. How do you know for sure if someone else is equally yoked in their walk with the Lord? It becomes pretty evident, pretty quick. If you, okay, let's just say in this environment, we have a pretty close community of young adults, young people. Probably in our church, there's probably 60 or so young adult singles in our church. So if they are interactive in community and they go on trips together, they go to Big Bend, they go to small groups, they go to Bible study, you start listening, you start watching, you can see their heart, you can see their passion, you can see their priorities. You can learn a lot about a person just interacting in community. If you just go on a date with them, we're going to go for dinner and a movie or something, you don't know anything about this person because it's a fake environment. But what you want to do is look at who people are and what they are in a very real environment. And that's the beauty of a church community, is that you're able to interact in a way. Sometimes people meet in a bar, or they meet online, or they meet all these different ways. But in a church community, it's a really very advantageous way to kind of see what people are about. Sometimes I'll see a couple kind of come together and I think, gosh, that's really unequally yoked, when in fact they were just both lost. The reality just became evident. Neither of them really know Christ. They're actually appropriately yoked. They're just both lost. So one of them was kind of pretending to be a Christian. Okay. Man, y'all are really something else. A 3-parter in fine print.
Do you need help?
I can actually read them. I just have to process. If I start reading them out loud, I'm kind of committed to the question. So I want to read them myself first. Okay, all right. This question is very important. So what is, we were talking about getting the family's input, say parents' input, this kind of thing. If you come from a truly abusive family, then parental involvement may not be as critical. If they're going to be abusive to you, if they have been abusive to you in the past, or if they're a criminal, or they are sexually abusive, or anything like that, it disqualifies them. It's a breach of contract. It's a breach of trust. Okay, so there, in cases like that, I've talked to people where they actually had a parent that abused them. And that individual is disqualified from then on. So there's no need to get their consent or their input. And sometimes I had a couple right now that was asking for my input because both of their parents are deceased. That would be another type of example, but they really wanted pastoral input because they didn't have any other place to go. So sometimes things do disqualify people. I'm not saying if somebody is a non-Christian, you should still honor them and respect them, and God can still speak through them even though they're a non-Christian. They may not share your faith or all of your values, but they can have valuable insight, and they really do love you. Non-Christian parents love their children. God hardwired them that way. And so don't just close them off because, well, I'm a Christian and they're not. Get their input. Humble yourself. Ultimate choice. Okay, this is good. I was talking about love as a choice. Feelings do change over time. Still, how important is physical attraction, having feelings for someone when considering a relationship with them? And I would say very important. I had a guy one time ask me, says, this woman that he was interested in, he says, I have zero attraction to her. And I said, do not pursue this relationship. You have, in the pre-marriage side, you have zero attraction. In fact, they were saying, I'm not attracted to them at all. So don't pursue it. There needs to be chemistry. And remember, we talked about the 12 steps of bonding, and those 12 steps all have to do with attraction. I would be very concerned about a couple, and I'm thinking of a couple different... Listen, I've been doing this a really long time, so I have a lot of reference points, a lot of people that I've known over 40, 50 years. So I think that even though I was emphasizing, underscoring love is a choice, it's for the highest good of somebody else, but when it comes to the chemistry of making a great marriage, I think it's important that attraction is a very important part of that. That was a really great question. Thank you for letting me clarify that. Okay. Does a person's sexual past matter if they have repented of sexual sin or are committed to their purity now? Their sexual past matters to the extent that prior to marriage it has to all be confessed. All of it has to be on the table. There can be no secrets. Because otherwise later, but it doesn't mean that they're pure. Does it mean that God has restored them? Does it mean there's been true repentance? And the question is, has there been a period of time to test that repentance? Right? There needs to be a period of time where they've lived their life in a way where they're free of whatever that area of failure was in their life. Okay, so there has to be a testing period. So, but yes, anything can be restored in God. Sometimes there are. I don't know if I should get into it. I'm not going to do it because it's too close to somebody that I know that some of y'all may know. Okay, same question. How do you determine the season? Sometimes that's where, if you're really struggling with the season part of it, we can talk. I mean, I'm available. Okay, somebody's referencing the chart. Right, okay. So they're saying they notice on the experimental dating column it was actually just secular, non-Christian dating without Christian morals. In your opinion, is there a way to experimentally date, aka casual dating, in a God-honoring manner? In that sense, that would, okay. And I would say yes to that. But I think it has to be casual and no strings attached, nothing possessive. It's difficult to do that. Can you have a one-time date without there creating a whole bundle of expectations and possessiveness? And Christians have all the same feelings and tendencies that non-Christians have in that regard. And so I think if it's kind of understood, that's why I was telling you that within a broader-based Christian community that oftentimes you can essentially not even need to date per se, because you're essentially meeting all the kind of criteria of getting to know each other within a giant group date, if you will. And it really is amazing how insightful it is when you go on a trip with a group of 30 single people and watch how they all behave and how they respond and attitudes come out. So, but it doesn't mean, that you couldn't. I went on, as a Christian, I think I went on, before I met Jeanette, I went on one or two casual dates after I broke up with the girl that I was telling you about. There were one or two dates I went on, but they were truly casual dates. There was no expectations. One of them is a friend on Facebook to this day, and there was just nothing to it. We were just good friends, and that's how it stayed, and that's how it was. We may have had a mild interest in each other, but that's all it was. So I think, yes, I think it's possible. Oh, do you remain friends after you marry? Okay. Yes, she is my best friend. And I don't know if you're asking that about my marriage, but we've been married, this summer will it be 48 years? 48 years. And she is my best friend. For sure. I'll just keep saying that and listen to y'all respond. How do you respond to someone who was ruined on Christianity and love? Okay. All right. Sometimes people have real hurts. Sometimes they have church hurt. Sometimes they have... but the potential for restoration always remains. If a person... And there may be a whole lot more to this. It's a very short question. I think people can be ruined on religion. And every church is full of people, and people are human, and people make mistakes. And you have to also remember, even within a Christian community, our church is probably, 150, 200 people or so. So you have to realize that within the mix of people that attend this church, they're probably not all saved. Some people are in process. We're trying to reach them. We're trying to disciple people. So if somebody is hurt in church, there still has to be a process of forgiveness and release. But ultimately, I could sit here and tell you stories of how deeply I've been hurt in the ministry over many years. But it never was an excuse for me to isolate from the church, because Jesus loves His church. And so I have a responsibility to love what He loves. And I can't have a reflexive defense mechanism like, I don't want to be around the church much because they're just going to hurt me again. That's a very unhealthy mindset. That's an unhealed mindset. And I don't know, it says ruined by Christianity and love. I'm not sure about the love part. I don't know how you're ruined by love, but unless maybe it's jilted, rejected, forsaken, dumped. I guess that's being ruined by love. How do you decipher between sexual desire and lust? Okay, boy, I can do a whole teaching on that. But a lot of times people misunderstand temptation as something unclean or bad, but on a human level, we're all tempted and sometimes every day in some way or another. The battle is with the mind. And sin, there's a tension between temptation, actual temptation, and there's a tension between that and the natural desires that we all have on a human level. And so, for instance, we talked about men and women in the very first part, wasn't it? That men are often stirred by sight. Women are stirred by more an affectionate level. Men tend to be more physical. Women tend to be more emotional in how they respond to somebody and also how they could potentially be manipulated, and vice versa. There will never, and I've talked to young men and they'll be like, oh, I just can't. I feel so guilty because this pretty girl walked in and I had thought about them. And I'm like, okay. And you don't think that happens to every man? In other words, because a pretty girl walks in the room and you noticed, is not a sin. It could become a sin. It could become a temptation. But men are hardwired to be attracted to women. And hardwired, that means it's non-negotiable. You're going to have that for the rest of your life. It's the way God made us. So you have to distinguish between design and how God made us and where the enemy comes in to pervert something, twist it, and make it something it was never meant to be in God's plan. So how do you decipher between sexual desire and lust? And so when Jesus said, if a man looks upon a woman, we can break this out, it can take too long. If he looks upon a woman to lust after her, he's committed adultery with her in his heart. Okay? He's not saying if you notice an attractive person. He's saying if you are committing adultery with them in your heart, in your mind, in your imagination, you're running with it. You can't, in other words, he's really citing the 10th commandment, and that is to not covet your neighbor's wife. And that is the context of that verse. And so a lot of people think, well, if I see somebody attractive to me or whatever at that moment, then, oh gosh, I've just done what Jesus said not to do, and I'm lusting for them, and then, not necessarily at all. You may just have a natural moment where you just notice somebody admire versus desire, and sometimes there are people that are just very, very attractive. Esther was one of the most beautiful women in the entire kingdom, and everybody could tell, everybody could see. And it's kind of a handicap. And if you're like a supermodel, it could create more problems for you. It's better just to be ordinary. Okay, you want to add on to that? One has respect and one doesn't. Right, and objectifying would also be another term of where there's a degradation involved and that kind of thing. How do you handle, I may not understand this question. How do you handle a situation where someone has a best friend of the opposite gender? Okay, I think maybe what this person means is, say you have, so let's just say you're a guy. I don't know how else to do this, that figure of scenario. You're a guy, you have a girl you like or that you're interested in or you have a relationship with, and she has a best friend who's a guy. You follow? So you are interested in her in more of a real special romantic sense, but yet she maintains this very close friendship with a guy. That's actually pretty common. I mean, when I was in college, I had great friendships with a bunch of girls. I always thought, plurality in numbers are safety. I mean, really, it's not playing the field. It's just that it's actually kind of a healthy thing. The problem is that a lot of men won't allow women to be friends. But I allowed several women to be friends in college, and I think it can be done in a healthy context. Remember this. In that scenario, when you get married, if you get married to her, that friend of the opposite sex is not going to remain. They will blow away with the next cold front. It's just not going to last. But if it's a girlfriend that she has, it can last for a lifetime. Remember that. Build lifetime friendships. And once in a while, I've heard of exceptions. I think your dad has a friend of the opposite sex that he's still close to after all these years. I think sometimes a childhood friend could remain a good friend after many years. But anyway, but it gets tricky if it's the opposite sex. So I went through pretty much all these. There were a couple of questions that I kind of bypassed a little bit. But if y'all have any more from the floor, we can just have a conversation. That's okay too. Yeah.
I have a kind of a two-parter. And I'm just going to read it outright, and if you want more explanation, just ask. Do you truly believe that it's gotten worse regarding what people are doing before marriage than, say, when you were younger?
Actually, the stats show, and I'd have to go back and look at this recently, that the Gen Z and the millennials tend to have a little more sense about purity than my generation. My generation was nuts. Oh yeah, y'all surprised? You think that we were just stuffy little... Okay, y'all have heard of Woodstock? Never heard of Woodstock? Okay. The Beatles, I mean... It was during the 70s, late 60s. It was called the sexual revolution. So it was a very, very promiscuous time. And those of us who were getting saved during that time were embracing purity very much so, and repenting of that entire cultural stream, which was very powerful at that time.
Then I guess, well, my second part was, if you thought it was getting worse, do you believe that that's why the average age is going on so late, because they're already cohabitation and having sex before marriage and everything, and they just don't believe that, that marriage is a piece of paper, basically. But if you don't believe that it's gotten worse, then why do you think the age is so late now compared to when you were younger?
Cohabitation... sexual promiscuity was a real thing during sexual revolution, okay? However, cohabitation wasn't. You're going to shack up together, that was still frowned upon in society much more so. Now it's become more mainstream. So I would say in that sense, it's kind of a yes or no answer. I think, yes, people do live together more, cohabitate, in a much more obvious, unashamed fashion now than they did in my era, high school, college era. Yeah. Anybody else? She's got a mic ready. Cameron? And Tara? Okay.
So I'm trying to think of how to word this, but like what technically defines marriage, right? Because you look at like old biblical terms, like it seemed like the men were to like go to the woman's father and ask for permission, and like it seemed like that's all it was, versus now it's like you're going through court, signing documents, like doing all this stuff. Like what defines marriage?
Yeah, well, I mean, in ancient Near Eastern times, the process was much more involved and took a long time. The engagement process was very binding in a lot of ways. There was oftentimes exchange of wealth. There were a lot of things involved that really everybody had skin in the game in that. As far as today, and I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. As far as today, there's a legal process of marriage. Are you asking if that's necessary? Or are you asking if that's...
I guess in a sense, like what would like seal the deal? Like you're now married. Like is it just like through like the ceremony? Like because I didn't really notice I've never read anything about being like previous like ceremonial marriage before. I mean, there might be something that
Oh, in the Bible?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, it was highly ceremonial, and there was a lot involved in it. The Jewish weddings were immaculate and very involved and very lengthy and celebratory. So you would probably have to go into some cultural readings of ancient Israel and look at the process of marriage in that sense. And maybe we've lost something there. I mean, sometimes there's portrayals of Jewish weddings in movies that are really kind of remarkable. I think there's one in The Chosen that's pretty remarkable, kind of reenactment of a Jewish wedding, because Jesus, remember, went to a Jewish wedding, and they had the wine prepared, and he saved the best for last, and all that, remember. So there was a lot involved, and I know sometimes people will say, well, does it even matter to go through a ceremony, and do I need to do it legally, and do I need to do it? I'm in a pastor's group, and they ask that stuff like that all the time. So people come to them with these complicated scenarios. Well, this couple has been living together. They're common law married by the state laws in their state, and they have 3 children, and the pastor takes the position, well, they still have to get married because we don't believe in living together outside of marriage. So in other words, marriage is about a covenant, and they have never made a public covenant. They may have said privately, we're married now, but the idea of, in our modern culture that has roots in Christian values and biblical values, is that marriage is about, we have witnesses, we have people that there's usually a pastor or a captain in the Navy or somebody of high rank or a judge that can officiate that marriage, and there's ceremony and vows. And I believe in the legality of it is important, and the reason is because in the dissolution of a marriage or divorce, there's so much legality to it that you almost need to have some sort of legal commitment to start with. Otherwise, it is actually a civil union. It is a spiritual union, but it's also a civil union. And it's important that it because you dissolve, then there are all these legal ramifications. It is not as simple as we'd like to think. And even having a child out of wedlock is very complicated because custody kicks in. There are so many legalities once you have a human being, but the couple is not married. It's just really, really a bad scenario. It's one to be avoided at all costs. So, but not with the cost of abortion, obviously. Adoption is always an option, you know. But anyway, I'm going way off. I know that's not where you were going, Cameron. I just thought I would address other things while you brought that up and got me thinking. So, and I probably didn't even answer your question. Huh? I meandered around it, you know. And anybody else wore you out yet? Have you wore me out yet? Oh, Tara.
Just very quickly, thank you for clarifying the difference between actually how legality and spiritually marriage is combined, because there's such a high divorce rate at the moment. And I've always believed, if you're not in a Christian relationship, if you don't have a religious reason, don't get married, just have a long relationship. If you're not gonna, because I've always believed that marriage is a religious thing. It should have never been a legal thing. And the way you described it, it makes a lot more sense now.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because
Right.
I've always thought that because now people want to go and marry the same sex, and they want to do all of this other stuff that's
Right.
not biblical, and that's not what marriage was originally for.
True.
And I understand that marriage has changed a lot throughout the centuries and all of that, but it's still what it was rooted in. You know?
Right. Right. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and marriage is one of the few things that involves a civil responsibility and a spiritual religious responsibility. It's one of the few things where the church and the state come together with a common purpose. And it's in the interest of the state to have a firm covenant of marriage. It's also in the interest of the church to have a firm covenant of marriage. So we have had a cooperative relationship with the state governments for centuries in the United States. And that's how we've been doing it. But there are a lot of reasons for it because it's all framed within very complicated legalities. And so, especially when it involves children, there just have to be protections in place, and those involve legalities. So I very much believe in the legal process of getting married, and then all the trappings that go with that. And my goodness, have a wedding, have witnesses, do it up, and get a pastor to do it. If they're willing. I won't do everybody's weddings. Yes, Tara?
So you've seen a lot of relationships flourish and not go well. So my question for you, to draw on that, the best relationship for marriage, is it the kind where let's assume you have similar values, right? Is it the best to have where opposites attract, different interests, and you bring out the best in each other? Or is it the ones where they're so similar and they're just on the same wavelength everywhere?
Okay. Like compatibility.
Yes.
Compatibility is just nonsense. It's all about chemistry. Okay, so here's what happens. These two people meet each other, and they think they have everything in common until they get married. Oh, you don't like doing that? You don't like hiking and camping? No, I did that for you. But you washed my car before we were married. You won't wash my car anymore. I thought that was a common interest. We don't have any common interests. And and you're an extrovert and I'm an introvert. By the way, extroverts and introverts always marry each other. Rarely do you have two extroverts marry each other. And then you always have a J and a P, like the J and the P. The J is like, I like everything, it has a place and everything's organized and everything's, and the P is like, I don't care. So they leave their underwear hanging around and the toilet paper's the wrong direction. How's the toilet paper at your house now, Amanda? I'll bet you she's the boss when it comes to toilet paper. She would come stay with us from time to time, and she'd go around our house and change all the toilet papers to opposite. I know she would laugh and laugh and laugh, picturing me having to set them all right. But that's an example of, so compatibility, you see people that say, well, they want a divorce because they weren't compatible. It's just nonsense. It's just a cop-out. Opposites actually do attract. It's almost a diabolical scheme by divine providence. And they don't know that they're opposites until after they get married, and they go, oh my goodness, I had no idea what it was like to live with a man. Okay, somebody else had a hand up? Okay,
So,
Mariah.
to add to that, my mom and dad, my mom's ESTJ and my dad is INFP. So it can work out. They've been married for almost 20 years. I feel like it really depends on the people, but yes, it can work out.
Well, we're not going to give you a personality seminar right now, but what they're citing, if you're not familiar with it, they're citing the Myers-Briggs letters. And so I actually do a teaching on that, but it is an interesting area. Jeanette and I are total opposites on every letter of the Myers-Briggs. And we've had a fabulous marriage. Sometimes we have trouble communicating. We maybe have to work a little harder at it than other people. Sometimes I'm interpreting her wrong and she's interpreting. We have to kind of, we're like doing this. And okay, hold it. All right, coming in for landing here. I think we can communicate now. All right.
No matter even if you're the same personality, you're similar, you still are both very different. You both have very different qualities and very different interests. And I really feel like that's how relationships build, is you know how to see through the differences and love each other anyway through that. So no matter if you're very similar, if you're very opposite, you will still have differences and you'll still add to that relationship and the characteristics, because every relationship is different. And when built on Christ, it will flourish in its own beautiful way. So no
Very
matter
nice.
if you're opposite or very similar, you still have differences, and that's what makes it beautiful.
Nicely said. Hear, hear. Now y'all are teaching each other. Maybe that's my cue, huh? Community. Maybe that's my cue. All right, Marcus.
In your opinion, what is an ideal timeline for couples that start dating or they're talking, or I guess what have you seen that's most common? Is it in the relationships that you've seen that are successful, did they start from a place of friendship, or were they kind of strangers and then they started dating pretty quickly? What have you seen that is most common?
I have couples take a test, and in the test they have to answer all this, a battery of questions. And they will say in the test that if people they'll have red flags. This is so if you've only known each other for a year, that's a red flag. It's not long enough. I'm not telling you my opinion. I'm just telling you what they say from a stats, from a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to say sociological standpoint or whatever. I'm more comfortable with people. Now, when people are later in life and they tend to, as they're getting remarried, they tend to be much shorter. Kind of like, we've done this all before. The whole time thing is shorter. It tends to be shorter. I would think an engagement, there's so much you have to get done in an engagement that I think 6 months is kind of a minimum, because otherwise it just creates a huge amount of stress. And you want your bride to have at least enough space to plan. So 6 to 8 months, I think, is probably good. If you've had a really great friendship for a number of years, or maybe 2 or 3 years, and it goes into engagement, I think those engagements can be shorter, and maybe they should be shorter. So there's no one size fits all, I don't think. I think some people are turtles, and some people are the hare. What is it, turtle and the hare, right? The turtles are moving really slowly, the hare is very fast. I've seen turtles that will literally date for 5 years, and I'm like, haven't you worn this thing out yet? Gee whiz. And they're just turtles. They're like, no, we're fine, we're happy. Are y'all like staying pure? Are you setting standards? Are you keeping boundaries? Oh yeah, oh yeah. But we do it all as turtles. You know, I don't understand it, because I'm not a turtle. I'm a man of action. Okay? I found the love of my life. I'm not messing around. But I did wait. I mean, in our case, I had a kind of a 1 year kind of where we were talking. And I said, again, it was characterized more as a friendship. We weren't really, I think I took her on 1 or 2 dates. That's it. And then we had a 9-month engagement, but we were also separated in location for part of that time. I think when it's a long distance relationship, like if you meet somebody on eHarmony, I think you need to take a lot of time, because you can't, it just needs more time, because all the meetings that you rendezvous are kind of artificial, and you need to really take more time to go through that process, I think. But I don't know if I'm answering that question very well. I feel like I'm babbling now. Have I lost y'all? Y'all are all still here. I mean, you could leave if you wanted to, but I'm glad you're all still here. Love you. I'm glad you're here. I don't feel rejected. I mean, if you leave, if you leave, I'm not going to feel rejected either. Okay, Val. Is there anybody else that has a comment or question?
No, you should
you
not.
know what nobody has asked is how appropriate is an age gap? Nobody asked that. And 3 years ago I did this, and nobody asked that then either. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Don't you worry about that? I mean, are you going to marry a 60-year-old man? No. Ew. No way. So there must be a protocol on age gaps, right? Was there somebody already raising their hand over here? Okay, Patrick. Patrick, can you go back to Izzy? I got you going now. Okay.
So if you're single and you've never been married, is there anything that would disqualify you from getting married?
If you're single and you've never gotten married, is there something that would disqualify you from being married?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, like character breakdown, a heroin addict, a porn addict, There are a lot of things that a person is not, if they don't have a handle on some of this stuff, they should not be getting married, period. So, yeah, absolutely. So, Izzy, you were going to comment about the age gap?
What is the appropriate gap then for an age gap?
Okay, there's a rule of thumb. I'll give you the rule of thumb. There's actually a chart. Hey, is it in there? Do I have it in the chart? All right, so there it is. There's the formula. This is considered, it's a sociological thing. It's not a biblical thing. It's just a general rule of thumb. So you take half the person's age and add 7 years. And that's the extreme. So if you are 22 years old, the minimum age would be 18. That's just 18 nowadays is too young. But if you're 24, it'd be 19. 32, it'd be 22. So you see how the gap gets bigger the older you get. You follow? But this is just a sociological guideline. This would be the extreme end of it. So, I knew somebody that was a much older man, and somehow they hooked a girl that's like 19 or 20, and we're talking a man who's 30 or 40 years older than her, and it was an abusive relationship, see, and a controlling cult-like thing. So there are scenarios which are very extremely unhealthy where the age gap is just way too much. And it's not even prudent. Because you're in 2 different generations, maybe even 3 different generations. You're so far apart that you don't even relate and communicate in the same way. So if you look on the older end, a 27-year-old really should not. 40 years old, that would be the biggest gap you should even consider. But the reason it gets bigger as you get older is because you developmentally, you think differently as you get older. So if somebody is a 40-year-old and they're going after a 20-year-old, developmentally, the gap is too big. She needs time to grow up. If it's a man, he's 40 and she's 20, the gap is too big because she needs time to grow up, and she is not mentally and emotionally equipped to be able to handle a 40-year-old man appropriately. Does that make sense? So you want to narrow that gap.
But isn't there an age where men just stop?
Well, they just stop?
They stop developing mentally.
But they stop developing mentally? Or are you talking about sexually? What are you talking about? What? Mentally. Physically? Mentally. No.
They always say, the joke is like they stop developing mentally after like 22 years old. Women are.
It depends on how many, it depends on your diet and how bad it is. I'm serious. These people, listen, I'll tell you right now, there are people my age, I'm 69, and I can tell you a lot of 69-year-olds that look 20 years older than me. Okay? And sometimes they're already starting to lose their edge. They're already, but did you know when you look at people's peak years, where they're the most productive possible, that 60-somethings are more productive than 50-somethings. 70-plus are more productive than 60-plus. So the sweet spot actually of the highest productive part of your life is actually in your 60s and 70s. I mean, look at Donald Trump, who's 78 years old. Look what he's accomplishing. So I'm just saying there are examples of people who are very high performance in their 70s. Okay, go ahead. So anyway, I'm going to dismiss that. Stop eating all the processed junk and seed oils and all this rancid stuff that young people live on every day. Okay, where were we at? All right, was there another question? Are we done? Have I exhausted you yet? You're exhausted? So this is the chart you all wanted, right? Like, so So how old, if you're a gold digger, then you want a man who's established. And it seems to take men so long to get established nowadays. Here, here. This is going downhill fast, I can tell. It really does. It really does take men a long time to get established nowadays. Okay, y'all want to call it a night? All right, love you all. Thank you.